there's a lot of war going on outside this country. And we got troops going all over the place. We're using B-2 bombers, bombing people you didn't even know we were bombing. So we got to cover this stuff. As we cover this stuff, like they tried to kill Bibi in his house. They attacked Bibi Netanyahu's house. Like, so things are popping off. We do need to keep track of some of this. I also did get a new book. Did not read it yet, but I've been waiting for this book for over a year. It's by Ilan Pappé, a very respectable historian. And it's got the American flag and the British Union Jack. Like, this is a serious, I mean, it's a huge, very, very many pages. So I got to get my reading on to get into that topic. But I'm looking forward to that. And I also got this big, giant book called The Founder, Cecil Rhodes, and the cult that he led. Anyway, these things still going on in the world today. I don't have time to read them before right now. So we'll just continue on, knowing that these are foreshadowings of world events that we're about to learn about. So in
Can I
this
ask you a
blog,
question real
yeah,
quick? Can I
please,
ask you a
please,
quick?
please. Yeah.
Okay. And I know there's a lot of people in the audience that might be thinking this too, but how long would you say it would take you to read like that Zionism book? Like,
Um, I'll I'll be conservative. It would take me less than a week.
there you go.
How much less than a week? I mean, it depends. If I had an uninterrupted 3-day weekend, I could knock that out. If there were more fun things to do, I could knock it out probably even faster because it's a topic I'm familiar with and it would be easy to learn the concepts in the book. If it's a topic I'm not familiar with, I got to read the book and look up the grammar or understand the individual parts. This would just be like parts I'm familiar with and additional information about how they fit together. So both those would
Awesome.
be pretty easy.
Cool.
So don't be
Thank you.
discouraged by reading.
No, don't be. Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of which, we do have a project coming up. I don't know how we're going to do this, but yesterday I had to move a substantial amount of John Taylor Gatto's library, and we had to move it from one location to another, and it was like 80 bankers boxes of books. Some of them are like the big brown banker boxes. So it was like a huge amount of, it's like 4,000 pounds of books, bro. Some of these books are literally like they're coffee table size books of like, they're this thick. It's like the history of Venice or the history of Florence. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So I have to make a schedule to like take 2 books per week or 2 boxes per week and go through them and see how these can be at some point organized and put into a place. Like I'm hoping in the future, if funding avails, that we could have like a property that has a little cabin that we could use for Airbnb and people could come by and all of Gatto's books would be in there. So part of the Airbnb experience is like get away from your electronics and come read some of the greatest books in history that have been preserved. So anyway,
Yeah,
someday maybe type stuff, but I had to move them
that's
yesterday.
amazing. I mean, what a priceless like what do you say, artifact, exhibit, like amazing. Just
It was
pretty
all going to be,
monumental.
yeah, I mean, it was going to be thrown out when he passed away and his wife had passed away. They were just like liquidating the apartment. So, a bunch of, it's me and a bunch of autonomy graduates. We went into New York City during COVID where people had to wear masks and some of our folks wouldn't wear masks. So they stayed outside with the U-Haul truck, which was good. You need to, you're double parked all day, so you got to have someone with the truck. But we got it done, and at some point that will come to fruition. And it's not a formal endeavor, but yeah, I had to interact with that yesterday. And books, like they don't need electricity; they work without internet. That knowledge is just there to be gleaned, and many people don't value or preserve books today. So you could really, at a very low cost, get into some serious like build your own library for your family, for yourself. Like, what is your knowledge base and where can you point to the stuff that you self instructed in as opposed to things that were told to you that you had to learn? You know, I might have on the shelves a couple books that were textbooks that I used throughout my schooling career, but I have, well over 1,000, 1,500 books that I self selected because I wanted to know what was in those books and to fill in pieces of understanding on various subjects. Most of those subjects are covered in this podcast. So, this first section of this block is a clip from Yuri Bezmenov, not in his interview, but in his lecture. The title of it is Destroying a Society. The Mainstream Media Rapes Your Mind. It's kind of what it's there to do. As you see that, you say that's a good placeholder. It applies to stuff we've seen tonight. It applies then to the war block, where we're going to see, here's traditional conservative reporting of the rah-rah war, of sending our troops overseas, of sending our military accoutrements overseas. Our taxpayer dollar stuff goes over there while we're at home undefended, which goes back to 4 or 5 hours ago. We were talking about playing Risk and getting people to move out of their territory for an emergency. Assault on Precinct 13. Is that what it's called? They made the movie twice, I think. But that's the gist. That's it's like a takeover move. It's a war strategy. And if you don't recognize these things, you can be subject to them in your society. So we're going to get to Yuri Bezmenov, and then B-2 bombers are bombing who? Who? The Houthis. That's who. U.S. weapons systems in Israel are arriving. Then they tried to whack Bibi's house. They sent maybe missiles. I didn't even check that story out, but it was interesting, and we would need to learn about that. And then Hezbollah be firing missiles at at Israel again. And which candidate's going to put a stop to this stuff, right? Because I know Israel is a really good friend of Trump, and Trump's grandchildren have right to return and good stuff like that. But is he crazy enough to back Bibi, or is he going to stand his ground? I mean, his son-in-law, Jared, shares his bed with Bibi in New York City. Bibi stays at Jared's apartment. I don't think he sleeps on a couch. And I'm not saying Jared's there at the same time. He's hanging out with Jared from Subway, probably. Anyway, no. Maybe it's just the time I'm getting hungry making food jokes. All right, so let's go to Fox. After we hear from Yuri Bezmenov, this comes from 1983-84, when he was a defector from KGB and started elucidating those tactics of international communism, which goes back to Xi Jinping wearing those camos for the world. Let's check it out.
One lifetime span of a person, a human being, which is dedicated to study, to shaping up the outlook, ideology, personality. No more, no less. Usually it takes from 15 to 20 years. What it includes? It includes influencing, or by various methods, infiltration, propaganda methods, direct contacts, doesn't really matter. I will describe them later. Of various areas where public opinion is formulated or shaped. Religion, educational system, social life, administration, law enforcement system, military, of course, and labor and employer relations, economy. Okay? 5 areas. I will not write them down because we will not have enough space. Sometimes when I describe all the methods, students ask me question, are you sure this is the result of the Soviet influence? Not necessarily. You see, the tactic of subversion, about which I'm talking, is similar to the martial art, the Japanese martial art. If some of you are familiar with that tactic, probably you will remember that if an enemy is bigger and heavier than yourself, it would be very painful to resist his direct strike. If a heavier person wants to strike me in the face, it would be very naive and counterproductive to stop his blow. The Chinese and Japanese judo art tells us what to do. First to avoid the strike, then to grab the fist and continue his movement in the direction where it was before, right? Until the enemy crashes in the wall. You see? So, what happens here? The target country obviously does something wrong. If it's a free democratic society, there are many different movements within the society. There are obviously in every society there are people who are against this society. They may be simple criminals, ideologically in disagreement with the state policy, conscientious enemies, simply psychotic personalities who are against anything. Right? And finally, there are a small group of agents of a foreign nation, bought, subverted, recruited. Right? The moment all these movements will be directed in one direction, right? This is the time to catch that movement and to continue it until the movement forces the whole society into collapse, into crisis, right? So that's exactly the martial art tactic. We don't stop an enemy. We let him go. We help him to go in the direction we want them to go. Okay? So, on the stage of demoralization, obviously there are tendencies in each society, in each country, which are going to opposite direction from the basic moral values and principles. To take advantage of these movements, to capitalize on them, is the main purpose of the originator of subversion. So we have religion, we have education, we have social life, we have power structure, we have labor relations, unions, and finally we have law and order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? These are the areas of application of subversion. What it means exactly? In case of religion, destroy it, ridicule it, replace it with various sects, cults, which bring people's attention, faith, whether it is naive, primitive, doesn't really matter. As long as the basically accepted religious dogma is being slowly eroded and taken away from the supreme purpose of religion, to keep people in touch with the supreme being, that serves the purpose. Therefore, replace it, accepted, respected religious organizations with fake organizations. Distract people's attention from the real faith and attract them to various different faiths. Education. Distract them from learning something which is constructive, pragmatic, efficient. Instead of mathematics, physics, foreign languages, chemistry, teach them history of urban warfare, natural food, home economy, your sexuality, anything, as long as it takes you away. Okay? Social life. Replace traditionally established institutions and organizations with fake organizations. Take away the initiative from people. Take away the responsibility from naturally established links between individuals, group of individuals, and society at large, and replace them with artificially, bureaucratically controlled bodies. Instead of social life and friendship between neighbors, establish social workers institutions. There are people who are on payroll of whom? Society? No. Bureaucracy. The main concern of social workers is not your family, not you, not social relations between groups of people. The main concern is to get the paycheck from the government. What will be the result of their social work doesn't really matter. They can develop all kind of concepts to show to the government and to the people that they're useful. Okay. Away from the natural links. Power structure. Okay. The natural bodies of administration, which are traditionally either elected by people at large or appointed by elected leaders of society, are being actively substituted by artificial bodies. The bodies of people, groups of people, whom nobody elected. Never. As a matter of fact, most of the people don't like them at all, and yet they exist. One of such group is media. Who elected them? How come they have so much power? Almost monopolistic power on your mind. They can rape your mind. But who elected them? How come they are They have a nerve to decide what is good and what is bad for the elected by you president and his administration. Who the hell are they? Spiro Agnew, who was hated by the liberal left, called them a bunch of enfeebled snobs. And that's exactly what they are. They think they know. They don't. The level of mediocrity. In a big establishment like New York Times, Los Angeles Times, major television network, you don't have to be excellent journalist. You have to be exactly a mediocre journalist. That's easier to survive. There's no competition anymore. You have your good, nice income, $100,000 a year. That's it. Whether you're better or worse doesn't really matter anymore. As soon as you're smiling to the camera and do your job. That's it. No more competition. Power structure slowly is eroded by the bodies and groups of people who do not have neither qualification nor the will of people to keep them in power, and yet they do have power. Okay. Together with that, there's another process. Law enforcement, law and order organization and structure is being eroded. For the last 20, 25 years, if you see old movies and new movies, you can see that in new movies, a policeman, an officer of the United States Army looks dumb, angry, psychotic, paranoid. A criminal looks nice, kind of, well, he smokes hash and shoots the whatever drug. But basically, he's a nice human being. He's creative. And he's unproductive only because society oppresses him. Whereby a general of Pentagon is always, by definition, a war maniac. A policeman is a pig, rude policeman. He abuses his power. You know? A generalization like that. The hatred, the mistrust to the people who are supposed to protect you and enforce law and order. Moral relativity. The Angelo Buono process lasted 2 years in Los Angeles.
The U.S. military also took action against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Defense Department announced U.S. military forces, including Air Force B-2 bombers, conducted precision strikes against 5 locations in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. The Pentagon said U.S. forces targeted several of the Houthis' underground facilities, housing various weapons components that the rebels used to target civilian and military vessels in the Red Sea and throughout the region. The Pentagon's spokesman said today, "We struck exactly what we intended to hit."
It also sends a clear message to the Houthis that there will continue to be consequences for their illegal and reckless attacks, which put innocent civilian lives and U.S. and partner forces' lives at risk.
In a release, the DoD said the United States will not hesitate to take action to defend American lives and assets and to deter attacks against civilians and our regional partners.
Now, you are once again taking a look at this post from Dr. Eli David, as he does say that Iran's official Telegram channel published that photo showing the direct hit at Netanyahu's residence there, again in a coastal community of Israel. He does say they are taking pride in their assassination attempt, but asks, does Iran's supreme leader's residence have similar bulletproof windows? A lot of questions here about how Israel will respond, so we'll keep you posted on Live Now from Fox. Do want to bring in Glenn Ignazio, retired Air Force Special Operations Commander, a military and national security expert, to discuss this and a lot of other developments. As always, Glenn, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Josh.
Of course. And before we talk about some of the other developments here out of the Middle East, I do want to ask you overall how it appears that an explosive drone was able to get that close to Netanyahu's home and apparently actually striking it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this is one of the things that even happened the other day with some of these drones that were getting through is, they're very small. So, you're looking at a lot of these identifications are usually visually. When I say small, they're similar to the size of birds when you look at it. And so they don't really show up on radar because if not, you'd see every bird flying and that would be very distractionary on a radar system. But so some of these things are getting through, and this one was rather significant to be able to hit Netanyahu's house. So I think that's going to get some attention, definitely after everything else has happened this last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I imagine this is not the first time that something like that has happened with an assassination attempt. However, probably one of the first times that we have seen a drone get that close to Netanyahu's home. We've seen them kind of landing all around northern Israel over the past, I would say, year or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the ability for that to be accurate enough to actually get to the house, to be able to continue, is definitely a capability that they have. And these small little drones with a pretty good explosive package to it is causing havoc all over the place. It actually started I wouldn't say it started, but it was very prominent in Ukraine, and now we see it very developed around the world.
And I do want to pop up this live image right here of the White House in D.C. as we talk a little bit more about the situation in the U.S.'s role in all of this, because the U.S. sent what's called a terminal high altitude area defense battery to Israel, along with the troops that are needed to operate. That's according to the Pentagon here, even as we know that Iran is warning the U.S. to keep American military forces out of Israel. I did want to ask you, because you are a true expert, the U.S. sending this system over to Israel, what is the system and why are U.S. troops needed to operate it?
Great for asking. Actually, I worked on a THAAD system. I worked for Lockheed some years ago, so I know it really well. So the THAAD system was really created after we saw what would happen in the first Gulf War, where we were hitting some of the Scud missiles. But what was happening is the warheads were still continuing and killing people. So the THAAD system was developed post that time. And so what happens is a radar system detects these ballistic missiles. And these ballistic missiles usually go right outside the atmosphere, come back in. The THAAD system can actually hit that target in or outside the atmosphere, which is pretty significant. The radar detects it, and as that launches, it decides which missile actually that's closest is the best to launch against a target. The missile launches, a shroud of the nose comes off, and it guides itself by seeing the heat of the missile using infrared. Now, the most impressive part about this is that there is no explosive capability on this missile like most others are. This literally is a bullet hitting a bullet, and so the missile hits the target and sacrifices and vaporizes the target where it completely destroys it. So a bullet hitting a bullet. So the technology is amazing. Now, why are there 96 troops to 100 troops? It's a very, very complex system. And it's designed to actually integrate with the Israeli systems to be able to coordinate between the David Sling, which is one of their systems, or the Iron Dome. So it's a very complex, very significant system. And the U.S. troops are the only ones really that can operate at that time. There's only a few other countries that have it. And that's why the U.S. troops will be there.
Does the fact that these U.S. troops are being sent over there indicating that the U.S. is going a little bit more, getting more involved in the conflict, or is it just that they needed to send those troops over to operate this?
I think it's twofold. So definitely need them to operate with. It would take too long to train anybody else to it. But let's think about sort of a secondary effect to this is one, most of the missiles that have been coming in from Iran, as we saw in the prior coalition strike that took all the other attacks down, we saw this other one here that was recent, is that it definitely improves the capability to intercept any of their missiles and shoot them down. So Iran is basically losing more at this particular time. But the secondary effect is we also have U.S. troops on the ground. So if U.S. troops, and I pray this never happens, is maimed or killed or anything happens from an Iranian attack, you have now the U.S. military involved in an operation against Iran. Now, of course, those are for the leadership to make the decisions of that, but that would be a very big deterrence for Iran to want to strike Israel.
I actually want to read this statement that is coming in from Netanyahu here related to that assassination attempt really quickly here. Let me pop up this image once again. This is coming from Dr. Eli David that shows the aftermath. He says, the agents of Iran who tried to assassinate me and my wife today made a bitter mistake. This will not deter me and the state of Israel from continuing the war of revival against our enemies to ensure our security for generations. I say to the Iranians and their partners in the axis of evil, anyone who harms the citizens of the state of Israel will pay a heavy price for it. We will continue to eliminate your terrorists. We will return our hostages from Gaza. We will return our residents in the north. We will achieve all the war goals we set, and we will change the security reality in our region for generations. Together we will fight, and with God's help, together we will win. Again, a report here, a statement just coming in from Netanyahu after that assassination attempt, so I did want to make sure to mention that here. Now, Glenn, as far as the death of Sinwar, that's obviously been a topic that, no question, a lot of people are discussing, because not just the fact that it's the death of Sinwar, but what happens next as a result. Do you think there's going to be any sort of real impact here to the Gaza war overall?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why. So Sinwar was, of course, in Gaza, and he was also a hard-line individual, a bad terrorist, and having him no longer on this earth is a good.
I do want to take you back to this breaking news, as we are getting a first look at what appears to be an assassination attempt by Hezbollah on Israel's Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. Axios reporting that Netanyahu's home in the coastal town of Caesarea was hit by an explosive drone launched from Lebanon by the terror group just days after Israel killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. This photo right here, posted on social media by Dr. Eli David, a well-known researcher and lecturer. David says this is from one of Iran's official Telegram channels, showing the direct hit on Netanyahu's home. Now, we are told that Netanyahu and his wife were not there at the time. He does say that they are taking pride in that attempt, and they asked if the Iran Supreme Leader does have similar bulletproof windows. Mark Chandler is the Director of Government Relations and Professor of Practice at Coastal Carolina University, also a former senior defense intelligence official. Joining us now live to talk more about this. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us today.
And we do continue to follow the very latest developments out of the Middle East. I wanted to head back to that live look of the Israel-Lebanon border, as the Israeli military says Hezbollah fired around 160 projectiles into Israel on Sunday. There were no immediate reports of casualties, but the attack comes after a drone targeted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house on Saturday. It wasn't clear if the house was hit, but there were no casualties in that attack. Israel has meanwhile ramped up strikes on southern neighborhoods of Beirut, where Hezbollah has a strong presence. The region also is very heavily populated with civilians. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has called civilian casualties in Lebanon, quote, far too high in the Israel-Hezbollah war, and urged Israel to scale back some strikes, especially in and around Beirut. Israel's conflict with Hamas continues as well, with Israeli strikes on multiple homes in the northern Gaza Strip overnight and into Sunday. According to the territory's health ministry, at least 87 people were killed. The ministry does not differentiate between militants and civilians. The Israeli military says it carried out a precise strike on a Hamas target. The U.S. is urging Israel to call for a ceasefire in Gaza following the killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar this past week. Neither Israel or Hamas have shown any interest in such a deal after months of negotiations went nowhere. The United States is meanwhile investigating an unauthorized release of classified documents that assess Israel's plan to attack Iran, according to 3 U.S. officials. A 4th U.S. official said the documents appear to be legitimate. Now, the documents are attributed to the U.S. Geospatial Intelligence Agency and National Security Agency, and also is marked top secret. They indicate that Israel was moving military assets into place to conduct a military strike in response to Iran's ballistic missile on October 1st. To speak more on this, I do want to bring in Caroline Glick, who is the senior contributing editor of Jewish News Syndicate and also the host of the Caroline Glick Show on JNS. Caroline, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Sure, my pleasure, Stephanie. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I do want to start with the very latest attacks by Hezbollah, the missiles, but also the assassination attempt against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What can you share with us?
So I can share with you that the missiles actually caused significant damage to the Netanyahu home in Caesarea. He and his wife were not home when it happened, but it wasn't a missile; it was a drone, and it hit his house, and it got through the missile shield. But he has, reinforced windows, etc., at his home, and so that was why they didn't penetrate. But it was significant damage that was caused to his home as a result of that strike. And I think one of the most alarming aspects of it is that this was really crossing a major red line. You can imagine how the United States would react if the Biden home in Delaware were attacked by an Iranian drone. There would be, B-2 bombers in Tehran within several hours to attack the home of Khamenei or whatever else was on the list. Here, not only did the United States not call Iran out, they didn't condemn it at all. They didn't, neither Kamala Harris nor Joe Biden called Prime Minister Netanyahu to express their revulsion at what had just happened. They didn't condemn the action in any way. In fact, they've said nothing at all. And it's almost, it's more than 36 hours after it happened. No comment from either President Biden or Kamala Harris. Instead, as you said in your intro, what they're doing is trying to get Israel to scale back our offensive operations against Hezbollah and Iran in Lebanon. And by the way, they really are unified now, because after Israel was able to eliminate Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah and two of his appointed successors in rapid succession, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps just said they were taking direct control over Hezbollah. So all the fig leaves are gone, and now Iran is just acknowledging that they totally control all aspects of Hezbollah's terror operations and their military operations against Israel. And yet the United States has nothing to say except that Israel should scale.
Or rather, pull it. That's interesting because United States, last week, we reported, sent a whole bunch of money to Lebanon. And Lebanon is being used as a proxy of Iran to attack Israel, which is our good time ally. And so there's kind of a conflict of interest going on there. My other question is, why is Israel allowed to throw, Hezbollah, when you send 160 missiles and none of them hit any targets, that's not serious armaments. It's not the same as Israel sending missiles into urban areas of Beirut, which is in Lebanon, a country that is not Iran. It's a country that the United States sends money to. It's an ally, therefore, of the United States as well. So the whole thing is getting out of hand, and, you can have a domino effect where this creates a World War III type of scenario, and that's not good. However, I made comments earlier in this episode about, Trump is traditionally, he's one of the friendliest presidents to Israel. So what would change in this election if Trump were elected? What would be happening with this particular war? And LD dropped this in the chat. Trump and Netanyahu don't seem to be getting along right now, according to the Times of Israel. Fuck him.
Or in 2021.
Well, yeah. Not so long ago, that's still the Biden administration.
Yeah.
But, they traditionally haven't been like super buddy. I'd say it's as cordial as a relationship as Obama had with Netanyahu, and it was widely known they didn't get along that well. Yeah. So what would he do today in this situation? I think he would look to de-escalate it, because the respect of the people, which is his currency now, right? He's not into building casinos. He's into building a country. So if you do something that gets us into World War III and your name goes down in history as Mud instead of Fudd, that's not a good thing. But also the Elmer Fudd, that would tie in with the Foghorn Leghorn from last week and the Looney Tunes theme that they bring to the table.
Yeah, but you also have to factor in the fact that in Vance's very first interview that he conducted as the vice presidential nominee, he said that he would punch Iran if anything were to happen, right? And so again, it goes back to that Godfather reference with Sonny Corleone in the meeting, where he's like, "Come on, Pop, let's sell drugs. We're cool." And he's like, "Come on, no, you can't," And so he made his intentions known in front of all the other dons, and so therefore, knowing that the second in command would get them what they wanted, they decided to take out the head guy. right? So that's a scenario.
But they
that
killed
I'm
Sonny
like,
first.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know what I mean, though.
I know.
Or no, what was it? What was it? Yeah, something like that. Wasn't it something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. But basically, it's like the idea of like, so what I'm getting at is that like, if Trump won't do it, Vance will get him, and then taking out Trump would definitely escalate if they blame it on Iran. But my question isn't all that. Is like, how are they getting drones over Netanyahu's house?
Well, that was kind of my question. Is it beyond the scope of possible that Israel would attack Bibi's house just so Bibi can get a free remodel? Because he does like to bring his laundry and his wife's laundry and his family's laundry to the United States, because we have this thing for diplomats which offers laundry service, which no one else takes us up on, but Bibi does. And you've heard that clip here on the show before, so I don't need to explain it any further. I wouldn't put it past him. How did they get it that close to the house? And I'm sure he's going to have renovations of the multi-million-dollar variety and upping of security. And how convenient. Instead of waiting for them to really attack, you could just have it. I mean, there is a history of kind of their strategy of preemption doing things like that. So did Bibi just have his 9/11? Or no, it's more of his 1993 World Trade Center thing, where it didn't take down the whole thing, but it got some renovations going.
Gotcha. Yeah, now that's some serious chutzpah. I thought it was like false flag to escalate tensions, but no, he just needed a remodel. That's
chutzpah in-law suite for Jared to sleep in when they visit,
Everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures. They're hosting videos. They're maybe even doing Q&As. And these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come